My name is Celeste Rowland. I'll never forget the night my own father's fist sent me crashing to the floor in front of hundreds of people, blood running down my face, the crowd gasping, and my sister smiling through her fake tears. That was the moment I knew the family I had been trying to please all my life had already chosen to break me. From the outside, my life looked enviable. Solid career, steady income, and a sprawling ranch house tucked near Aspen, paid for with my own relentless work. Yet every time I turned toward my family, that pride was met with nothing but dismissal. To them, I was always too sharp, too ambitious, a daughter who didn't know her place. Harper, on the other hand, was their crown jewel. Since childhood, she had been wrapped in silk dresses, paraded in front of relatives, showered with praise for every smile. I was told to lower my voice, to remember that men built cities and women built families. No matter how far I climbed, I remained the wrong kind of daughter. When Harper announced her engagement, the household erupted as though royalty was about to wed. A luxury resort in Santa Fe was booked, 300 guests invited, and even the local press was promised a spectacle. I threw myself into preparations the way I always had, negotiating with florists, securing a string quartet, transferring tens of thousands of dollars to cover decor no one else wanted to pay for. But when the programs were printed and the thank yous rehearsed, my name was nowhere. Driving south from Denver on the eve of the wedding, I stared at the empty highway and knew the truth. I wasn't part of the celebration, only a shadow moving along its edges, and beneath that knowledge was a heavier certainty, pressing like a storm waiting to break. This time, they didn't just want me silent, they wanted something far more costly. My childhood lacked nothing in comfort, yet it starved me of fairness. Harper, 4 years younger, was hailed as God's gift to the Rowlands. She was their angel, their pride, the daughter who could do no wrong. I, on the other hand, was measured against her glow and found wanting. "If only you were as sweet as your sister," they would sigh, as if my every effort was a flaw that needed correcting. I remember the day the acceptance letter from MIT arrived. My hands trembled as I tore open the envelope, certain my parents would finally be proud. My father only shook his head, muttering, "What a waste of money! No reason for a daughter to go so far. Harper is the one who truly makes us proud." Months later, when Harper was accepted into a modest in-state college, champagne was poured, a cake was brought out, and the house filled with cheers. My own achievement had earned me nothing more than a quiet dinner and a plain envelope with a few bills for books. The imbalance carved itself into me. I pushed harder, worked longer, slept less, determined to prove I was worthy. But the more I succeeded, the more I was labeled. Too ambitious, too intimidating, too much. Meanwhile, Harper was adored simply for being charming and pleasant, the golden child who never had to strain for approval. That disparity didn't fade with time. It grew sharper, heavier, until it shaped every corner of our lives. By the time I turned 30, I had fought my way high enough in my career to buy something that was entirely mine, a sprawling ranch house in Aspen. I still remember the first time I stood in its empty living room, the glass wall framing snow-capped peaks, the air rich with the scent of pine. My chest swelled as I whispered to myself, "This is mine, paid for with sweat, sleepless nights, and nothing handed down." But my pride met only dismissal. My father scoffed. "What does a single woman need with a place that size?" My mother chimed in with a smile. "It'll be perfect once Harper and her future husband start a family." I forced a thin smile, biting back the anger burning in my throat. Deep inside, I felt a chill of recognition. They didn't see the house as mine. To them, it was already family property, just waiting to be reassigned. With Harper's wedding approaching, the uneasy knot in my stomach tightened. My instincts told me the ranch house, my sanctuary, my proof of survival, was about to become the centerpiece of a plan I hadn't yet uncovered. The resort in Santa Fe shimmered under the New Mexico sun, the red mountains glowing like fire against the clear sky. I pulled my car into the lot, smoothed the hem of my navy dress, and touched the pearls at my ears. I had chosen the outfit carefully, elegant but understated, meant to disappear into the background. This was Harper's day, and the last thing I wanted was to be accused of stealing her light. The moment I stepped inside, the whispers started. A cluster of ants tittered behind manicured hands. "Celeste still single? 36 already." All that success. But what good is it if no one comes home to her? Their words clung to me like burrs, sharp and familiar. I tightened my grip on my clutch and offered them a brittle smile. Across the room, Harper floated through the crowd like a starlet, her crystal-beaded gown scattering the light. My mother hovered near her, fussing with the veil, whispering little praises. Every head turned their way, faces lit with admiration, while I became invisible again. At the refreshment table, I poured a glass of water. That was when Jeffrey, my cousin, strolled up, his voice raised just enough for his friends to hear. "Celeste, maybe if you spent less time in an office and more time in a bedroom, you wouldn't be alone today." Laughter erupted around him. I forced a polite smile, murmured some hollow congratulations, and stepped away before my anger could spill over. My chest thudded with rage, not shame. These were the same barbs I had endured for years, each one cutting deeper with its repetition. But as I walked to the edge of the ballroom, I knew this day would not end with little cuts. Something far more brutal was coming. The jazz band's melody floated through the air when a sharp clink pierced it. My father stood at the head table, whiskey glass raised, his face flushed. The ballroom fell into silence. A cold weight settled in my stomach. He cleared his throat, a strained smile on his lips, but his voice booming. "Family is everything, and today we have a special gift for Harper." My pulse quickened. Her sister Celeste has decided to give her the Aspen Ranch House as a wedding present. Applause exploded. Guests rose to their feet. Chairs scraped. Cheers rang out. Harper lifted her hand to her mouth in feigned shock, but the sly curve of her lips betrayed her satisfaction. I froze, blood rushing in my ears. Then, with every ounce of strength, I stood. My voice carried across the room. "No, I never agreed to that. The ranch house is mine." For a heartbeat, silence. Then came the murmurs. "Selfish. It's just a house. Her sister's starting a family. She should step aside." Hundreds of eyes bore into me, sharp as knives. My father slammed his glass down, whiskey splattering the linen, his face darkening to a dangerous shade. "You will not humiliate this family on your sister's wedding day," he roared. Harper dropped her hand, her gaze meeting mine with chilling calm. The smile that lingered was no longer pretending. It was triumph. In that moment, I felt it. The script they had written for me had been shattered. I was no longer the silent daughter meant to comply. And my father, stripped of his control, saw my defiance as unforgivable betrayal. The storm had finally broken. The ballroom glittered beneath chandeliers, the hum of voices swelling and fading until it suddenly dropped into silence. My father's face, flushed from drink, twisted with fury as he staggered toward me. "You will not disgrace me in front of family, partners, the entire world," he shouted, his breath thick with whiskey. I stepped back, forcing my voice to stay steady. "That house is mine. I bled for it. It isn't a prop in your performance." His eyes bulged, hand shooting up. The punch slammed into my chest with brutal force. Air fled my lungs as my body pitched backward, skull cracking against the sharp edge of the buffet table. A sickening snap echoed in my ears, followed by the warmth of blood streaming down my temple. Screams erupted, chairs toppled, silverware clattered like gunfire. Through the chaos, I glimpsed a phone held aloft, its tiny red light blinking. Someone was recording, no, live streaming. Darkness folded in around me, the world reduced to scattered shouts and broken music. I woke beneath harsh fluorescent lights, the acrid sting of antiseptic filling my nose, Beeping monitors pulsed steadily beside me. My body throbbed with pain. A nurse pressed my shoulder down as I tried to rise. "Don't move, Ms. Rowland. You've suffered a concussion, 6 stitches at your temple. You're lucky it wasn't worse." My lips parted, but only a hoarse rasp escaped. My head spun as the words sank in. A doctor appeared, his tone clipped. "Clinical. That fall could have killed you. This wasn't an accident. It was assault." My phone buzzed violently on the tray. Dozens of messages, hundreds of notifications, links flashing. With trembling hands, I opened one. The live stream. There I was, my father's fist, my collapse, the blood. Thousands of comments poured beneath it. What kind of man does this to his daughter? He belongs in handcuffs. Then the screen lit with a name I knew by heart. Jonathan Pierce. I answered, voice breaking. "I saw the video." His calm baritone came through. "Do you want me to intervene? I can have attorneys there tonight." My chest tightened. Every instinct screamed to say yes, but another voice inside me resisted. If Jonathan stormed in now, it would become his rescue, not my stand. "No, not yet. Let them show the world who they really are." He paused, then answered quietly. "All right, but remember, you're not alone." I set the phone down, my hands trembling, heart racing. For years, silence had been my prison. Now, silence was theirs. The live stream was no longer shame, it was proof, a weapon they couldn't erase. The monitor beeped steadily beside me as I drew a deep breath. For the first time in my life, I knew I would never bite my tongue for them again. While I lay under fluorescent lights in the ER, the celebration I had helped build unraveled 200 miles away. In the grand ballroom of the Santa Fe Resort, whispers surged like a tide. Every guest's eyes flicked down to glowing screens. Replaying the moment, my father's fist dropped me to the floor. The wedding music had died, replaced by the relentless churn of murmurs and gasps. Then the ballroom doors burst open. Jonathan Pierce strode in, flanked by 2 attorneys in dark suits. The weight of his presence silenced the room instantly. The man who once mentored me, who had given me my first chance when no one else believed I belonged at the table, now faced my father with a composure that was sharper than any blade. "Richard Rowland." Jonathan's voice rang out, steady, commanding, amplified by the room's uneasy quiet. "There is something that must be set straight. The ranch house in Aspen is not a wedding gift. It is the legal property of Celeste Rowland, protected by a contractual clause that forbids coercion." One of the lawyers moved to the projector, and with a single click, the screen dropped from the ceiling. The video began to play. Gasps punctured the silence as my father appeared on the footage, stumbling toward me, the crack of his fist, my collapse, the blood spreading across the tablecloth. Some guests turned away, hands over mouths. Others sat frozen, forced to watch what could never be denied again. My mother lunged for the microphone, her voice shrill with rage. "She's selfish. She destroyed her sister's happiness." Jonathan fixed her with a look that cut through the air. His reply was calm, deliberate, each word a blow. "So, a family does not knock a daughter unconscious in front of 300 witnesses. A family does not strip the eldest child of her hard-earned home to stage a spectacle. What happened here tonight is not family. It is violence. It is theft. It is a crime." The declaration landed like a gavel strike. The once celebratory ballroom felt transformed into a courtroom, chandeliers gleaming like harsh spotlights. Guests shifted uncomfortably, some rising to slip away, unwilling to be tied to the scandal. Across the head table, Harper's new in-laws exchanged grim, silent looks, their faces pale with realization. The fairy tale they had bought into had dissolved into disgrace. And with that, the night was no longer a wedding. It was judgment. The Rowlands stood accused, not by me, but by truth itself, exposed under the weight of witnesses and evidence that could not be buried. The stage they had built for triumph had turned into their public reckoning. News spread faster than a summer wildfire racing through the dry hills of Colorado. By dawn, headlines screamed across every screen. "Real estate CEO strikes daughter at daughter's wedding." The image chosen by most outlets was one I could barely stand to look at. Me sprawled on the ballroom floor, blood pooling near my temple. Guests frozen in shock. The live stream had reached millions within days, each share multiplying the humiliation for my family, but strangely, a validation of the truth I had carried alone for years. Contracts vanished overnight. Developers who had courted my father's company for decades abruptly severed ties. One statement from a longtime partner simply read, "We cannot, in good conscience, continue any association with violence of this nature." Investors, furious at the collapse in public trust, demanded my father's resignation. Within a week, the empire he had spent his life projecting as indestructible began to crumble in his hands. For Harper, the fallout was even swifter. The fairy tale wedding that had been staged so meticulously ended before the ink dried on the marriage certificate. Her new in-laws released a terse announcement distancing their family from what they called an environment of abuse and coercion. Brian left her side that very night, retreating with his parents, leaving her sobbing in a designer gown that no longer symbolized triumph but disgrace. As for my mother, the queen of appearances, the collapse of her princess dream shattered her composure. She railed on social media, calling me ungrateful, selfish, poisoned by career ambition. Screenshots of her rants circulated almost as fast as the live stream itself, each one drawing ridicule rather than sympathy. The kingdom she built on favoritism and pretense had dissolved in the span of hours, and she was left screaming into an echo chamber. Late one night, my phone buzzed. Harper's name lit up the screen with a single text. "You ruined my life." I stared at it for a long moment before my reply. "No, I simply refused to let you ruin mine." The weight of those words steadied me. For years, I had been cornered into silence, my role carved out as the dutiful, invisible one. That night, I broke it. I contacted an attorney. The decision felt less like a choice and more like inevitability. With the viral video as undeniable evidence, I filed formal charges against my father. Assault, coercion, attempted misappropriation of assets. For once, the law and public opinion were aligned. There was no narrative he could spin, no private conversation to bury the truth. The red light of that live stream had already captured everything. Wasn't the punch that sent me to the ER. It was the moment I stopped absorbing blows and struck back. The silence that had muted me for a lifetime ended with a signature on legal paperwork. It wasn't vengeance for its own sake, it was reclamation. I was no longer content to survive their cruelty in shadows. The reckoning had begun, and this time, it would be written in my voice. A week later, I returned to the ranch house in Aspen. The drive up the winding mountain road left me sore and exhausted. But when the house came into view, its wide glass windows catching the light, the peaks towering behind, it felt like stepping into a sanctuary no one could touch again. The first thing I did was call a locksmith. Every lock was replaced, every key recut. When he handed me the new set, he nodded knowingly, as if the whole world had already seen why this mattered. That evening, I hung a framed photograph of my grandmother above the fireplace. Her soft smile seemed to echo the words she once whispered to me. "Never let them shrink you." Each morning after, I stood by the towering windows with a mug of coffee, watching the first rays of sunlight spill gold across the ridges. The air smelled of pine, crisp and grounding. What once felt like a prize I had to defend now stood as something different, a declaration of boundaries, of survival, of freedom. Work followed me, of course. Within days, I received the news. I had been promoted to Director of Global Projects. My phone buzzed with congratulations from colleagues who told me how proud they were, how my resilience had inspired them. Friends visited, filling the house with laughter and warmth. They called the ranch house Celeste's heaven, and in their voices I heard something I had craved all my life: respect without conditions. For the first time, I felt the weight of family fall away and something lighter take its place: chosen kinship. People who didn't demand sacrifice to prove love, who didn't call my success selfish, who didn't ask me to surrender what I had bled for. One quiet morning, I carried my coffee to the deck overlooking the lake. The surface shimmered as the sun stretched across it, light rippling like an invitation. I breathed in deeply, the cold mountain air filling my lungs, and whispered to myself, "Blood doesn't always make you family. Respect does." And as the words left my lips, I finally believed them.